Hey guys, hope you're well, and welcome back to another episode. Today we reach Wily Tower, the final unlockable section in Wily Wars. We went through Mega Man 1, 2, and 3. Now the Wily Tower becomes available. Seeing it with its gray font makes it look like it's something you can't select, but that's the look they were going for, I guess. Selecting it prompts a little cutscene of Dr. Wily talking some trash, calling you names like a metallic moron, and saying he's got a few more robots that were designed specifically to crush Mega Man into a tin can, and warns you to try not to fall to pieces. What's really cool about this part in the series is we're going to be seeing and hearing all Sega exclusive content, of course, as opposed to comparing all the differences from NES to Genesis as we did in the last few videos. First and foremost, the level select theme is really cool, and they did a great job with it. We have 3 all-new bosses to take down with some interesting backgrounds. Apparently the 3 of these guys were inspired by 3 main characters from the famous 16th century literary work, Journey to the West. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, what? It's so bizarre. But it's definitely pretty cool, some interesting stuff to read about for sure, and they're part of the appropriately named Genesis unit. Their names are really strange: Buster Rod G, Megawater S, Hyperstorm H. When you select the stage, this is when you're given the option to select 8 weapons from any of the 22 you unlocked previously, and you also get to choose between your other mobility and rush abilities for 3 of those too, which is awesome. I didn't take a ton of time choosing the weapons. I figured it wouldn't matter all that much. I went through and chose a lot of weapons based on how useful or powerful they seemed in the other games, and I do a little switching later on. The abilities though were great because I was able to really take advantage of the best ones out there since they provide so much safety and a lot of options. Magnet Beam, Rush Jet, and Item 2. What's really cool is how detailed and sweet your menu looks with your custom weapons. It's awesome to see them drawn out in this way, and I figured it's something where the most hardcore Mega Man fans would definitely appreciate seeing all of them, so I figured I might as well quickly show all of those, just to conveniently please any curiosity out there. Talking about the levels, they're definitely really interesting to take in, since they use so many enemies from the previous Robot Masters, along with plenty of dangerous spots with spikes or pits. Difficulty-wise, I would say it's up there with the reopening of the Mega Man 3 stages, probably harder in fact, but it's evened out if you're smart about using your mobility items at the right times. It definitely has a Mega Man party feel to it, where everybody's invited, like a true celebration of this trilogy. The elevated sense of collaboration and level design reminds me of the Special Zone from Mario World. As always, it's super important to just keep moving forward and leaning on your abilities to get past the instant kill zones, to avoid those game overs and starting these levels from the beginning, because they're pretty long. Buster Rod is quite tricky and definitely takes a little practice getting used to his timing while also adjusting for the slowdown, which comes and goes intermittently. He's an interesting foe where he spins his staff to block your shots, and when he busts out that rod, it blocks shots as well. So your timing really does matter a lot with this guy, otherwise you'll get completely floored. I wanted to keep the challenge authentic, so I didn't look up weaknesses or anything, figured it would turn out better that way, and from what I was holding, Quickman's Boomerang was dealing 2 pegs of health, which isn't a ton, but obviously twice as good as 1, which definitely matters because he deals solid damage with 3 from his pull and 4 from body contact. One important thing to mention is of course we still get to use our sliding ability from Mega Man 3, which definitely helps a lot. Buster Rod is definitely a really interesting fight, and there's nothing else like him out here at all in any of the other games, so I'd say he was really well done. Next we'll tackle Hyperstorm H, the biggest Robot Master that you've ever seen. The theme here is underground and industrial, with of course more enemies scattered throughout from previous games, and they're put in some tough spots. I think that's one more thing to definitely compliment about these levels, is they didn't just reuse enemies and throw them all around without any thought. There are always tough sections based on what enemies they decide to use that almost feel fan-made, and I mean that in a good way. It seems like they put a lot of effort into boiling down their ideas into room after room of solid challenge, and it's fun to approach all of the new obstacles that they laid out between you and this Mega Marathon's finish line. This level is pretty tough, and I found myself banking on my abilities quite a bit, as I was of course stretching my lives as far as I could go to reach the next checkpoint, if not the boss. And again, using all of your mobility items together in these different rooms leads to a lot of fun options, plus they're extremely helpful, cannot be overstated. It's really cool how much this opens up all of the gameplay, and creatively you can truly be at your best. Although the level is pretty tough, I can tell you that Hyperstorm itself really isn't that horrible of a fight, which might surprise you seeing that they give this guy 2 life bars and he's the only Robot Master with such an advantage. But even though he has twice the health, he's simply extremely easy to land shots on consecutively. Even with just 1 peg at a time from the Buster, you just have to deal with his inhaling and blowing out of air. Although the borders of the room look pretty menacing with the spikes, they are surprisingly not instant kills, and even if they were, I don't think it would be that big of a deal anyway. Sliding and running away while quickly constantly turning for quick shots racks up damage fast, and when he blows air out, he also shoots a little projectile every second, but again, it's extremely easy to just pour on the damage while he's doing that for several seconds at a time. After the air cycles, he jumps from one end to the other, with the little helmet enemies falling too, but still, there's just never a point in this fight where it feels out of control since he's basically always in your line of sight and vulnerable, plus easy to avoid. Already on the third Robot Master, Mega Water S. So first thing you'll notice is that it looks straight up like Green Hill Zone in the background. We spend basically the entire level underwater, which in some games that might not sound fun, but with Mega Man, it really is equivalent to playing with moon physics on, so it actually is really fun. This would of course be the level to take advantage of Rush Marine if we had selected it, but it never seemed necessary at all, since basically nothing is out of your reach with your underwater jumping abilities, and the other items work underwater anyway. They like to line instant kill spikes on the ceiling, which could be a little menacing, but I never really had any problems with them at all. If you ever did, pretty simple to use a magnet beam or rush jet to avoid that. For the most part, enemies are kind of placed in some annoying spots to make you take damage before you could move on, and it's fairly worth it to just run or jump past whatever you're tired of shooting your broken buster at. Reaching Mega Water, it's definitely laid out to be a pretty interesting fight. Never seen a boss room like this. It's able to activate a shield for several seconds to block your shots while it shoots its own little hook out at you. It seems like he really never leaves that main platform, never did it in the few times I encountered him. So then the response to that will probably just be camp on the left and use the water to jump up and shoot while avoiding the spikes, him and his intermittent shots. It is pretty annoying how long the invincibility lasts, so no shame in checking out what could do more damage, and it turns out that Iceman's weapon actually works really well. Although I had higher hopes for Elecman, I guess that would make too much sense. Would have definitely liked to see a bit more movement out of this fight instead of just jumping in the same spot and waiting out invincibility periods, but hey, that's all three of them down. Now it's time we embark our way up Wily Tower. New Wily stages means new Wily musical themes, which is always a plus, and we're going to hear a couple cool ones as we make it through these levels. They use the same pattern from Mega Man 3's Boss Rush in the background, and they even have like 4 layers back there, which is really cool, and you'd see how these work together. Although it leads to some pretty intense slowdown, I mean, really intense. It's got some tricky spots, just as you'd expect, but nothing totally insane, especially with the help of your items. Could have mentioned this earlier, but there are some spots where you actually need to have a crash bomb or hard knuckle, often just containing little rooms with items, but sometimes revealing alternate paths completely, which is definitely pretty cool and helps provide nice replay value for the biggest of Mega Man fans out there. It's pretty neat to see some throwback of level ideas, like this bottomless pit with the enemies from Iceman's level for example. At some point in the stage transitions into Fireman type of deal with the platform from Gutsman stage, and we encounter a really cool boss that reminds me a lot of something you might see in a Zelda game, honestly. The developers played with a new idea where you have springy parts on your platform, which is used in order to reach its face to shoot. It's absolutely something I would have liked to see without the slowdown because the overall style and the flow is a breath of fresh air. It's really unique, but it's not too tough as your buster does 2 pegs of damage and avoiding the fire from splashes or its mouth isn't anything too crazy, especially with the pace of it. Wily Tower Stage 2 has a pretty interesting song with it, on the lighter side of things. You start out underwater with some enemies from Bubble Man stage and spikes to avoid, which the Magnet Beam is great for. Eventually we make it out of the water, and in general there's a lot of borrowed Mega Man 2 in this stage. A main theme here are the dropping spikes and conveyor belts from Metal Man's level, along with the little cannon enemies that we saw a lot of in Flash Man's stage. You can just see how much easier Rush Jet makes so many sections of it, but hey, only a fool doesn't use the tools that are provided to him. And besides, these levels aren't necessarily short, so it definitely feels good to motor through them while wasting minimal time. The next boss is pretty decent, but suffers a lot from slowdown again. It has lasers that functions a lot like Gemini Man. We already know that makes everything come to a crawl, and you can only shoot it when its face is exposed. Fortunately for you, and for time's sake, it can only shoot 2 lasers out at any given time, which isn't too horrible to avoid. It can just get tricky in the mix of those, with all of the bosses bouncing from one end of the room to the other. Another stubborn part about this is it's sometimes sitting at a height that's just too high for a straight line shot, and even Metal Man's blade doesn't do anything to it, which was disappointing. But just using the Buster works fine enough, I guess, and once the health is around 60% gone, it transforms into a spiked form, and figured might as well try the magnet weapon to get a couple of shots. It does pretty good damage, and then what else to try? Elect Man's would be easy to hit with, and that does some major damage. And just like that, we are on our way to Wily Stage 3. They went for a different look this time, and it turned out pretty cool. Definitely has a nice shine going on, with a futuristic outer space feeling to it. There's a solid amount of green ball chain throwing guys, and some nods to Top Man, with tops used to cross a gap and a familiar enemy as well. A couple of machines from Magnet Man's stage have been used as well, with these disappearing block mazes. But one enemy you definitely don't want to try running from are these dang robotic apes from Woodman's level. Thought for sure I could run past it, but it stuck around and put plenty of work in on my health. Figured he would just jump into one of the gaps eventually, but nope, just wouldn't do it. I reached a point where I had barely any health left and narrowly avoided dying with the post-hit invincibility. You can see I climb up to a room where I think for a second that I probably have to use an E-tank, which I don't want to use, but I realized that Elect Man could probably take the enemy out that's going to land on my head, which worked out great. Definitely trying to save these in case I need them for later to finish the game or avoiding a game over. Per usual, leaning on your abilities during the most risky or time-consuming of rooms is still a great option in many places. It's definitely surprising to see what kind of fight is waiting for us at the end of the stage, where we have another Buster Rod fight, but this time it's totally different. It's actually really cool, and I love the concept, as we all fall with the platforms and some fall a bit faster or slower than others. It's really entertaining, but of course the downfall is just how slow and ridiculous things get. There's definitely some fun to be had, with some particularly interesting moments where I almost died at the bottom of the screen when trying to summon Rush Jet. And it's all because I decided it'd be way too easy to finish this fight with the magnet weapon, which does heavy damage. It's one of the better fights that I've seen. It's just that dang slowdown. It does not do any of these fights justice. But anyway, after careful jumps and some magnet beam usage, not too bad to finish this guy off for the second time. After seeing Buster Rod again, you might be thinking this must mean we'll be running into the other couple of rematches with the others. I know I was, but nope, just to stretch through some final things like the drills, metal spikes, and those final hallway drops from Mega Man 2. We even get a really thoughtful nod to Proto Man, which is a nice touch for the fans, and further makes this whole thing feel like they really tried to have fun with it and were big fans themselves. So we're finally on the last boss, and wouldn't you know it, the legs and the way they move look a whole lot like Dr. Robotnik or Eggman. It seems way too similar to be a coincidence, but that's what it reminds me of anyway. It's another decent fighting idea with some moving platforms, and I'm a fan of the style. It just slows things down quite a bit. Even though I came into this fight without much health, I'm still just feeling out the forms before committing harder to a more serious run, which is typically how I go about these things. Feel it out with a life or two before leaning in and throwing everything I can at it. But while feeling it out, I just so happen to quickly discover a major weakness with Elect Man. Not only does it incur heavy damage, but it's not deflected by the rest of the leg like the Buster was. So all of a sudden, we're on the second form, and it's like a boxing top half that you just have to wait for and jump on the platform instead of getting hit in the face. I still wasn't using my E-tank because I wasn't sure if it made sense, and I had other lives, so I'm still feeling it out at this point. Metal Man's blade didn't do more than one peg of damage. The next weapon I decided to try is another strong one, Crash Man. And look at that, it just eats through his health like crazy, a big weakness. All of a sudden, its health is lower than mine, and I realize why I can't shoot anymore, I actually ran out of ammo. So just a quick switch back to the Buster, and look at that. Came in here with barely any health, and somehow we are 2 forms down. At this point, I recognized the opportunity and that it wouldn't make any sense to start things over, and definitely feeling confident to finish the final form with a couple E-tanks even though I have no practice with it, based on how those first 2 forms just went. With the final form being in a ship above our head, pulling out Metal Man seemed like a good idea, and even though it only deals 1 bit of health, I just rolled with it and got the most out of the fight just to see how tough it is, and the answer is that it's not very hard. He drops his own form of a crash bomb that deflects your shots, but at least they do not cause any contact damage to you, which is really great, only needing to avoid the explosions. And even though Metal Man doesn't do much damage, it's not that hard to stay 1 step ahead of him most of the time and throwing it diagonally at him. At one point in the fight, he came down and caused some contact damage, which is substantial, but only did it once during this fight, and it really wasn't that hard to overcome. Plus, if things really got out of control, I still had a couple of E-tanks left. As Dr. Wily falls to the floor once again, he makes a break for it, and I was definitely expecting yet another final boss going skull to skull on the map as we've done before, but actually, we just chase him through the credits as we get to see all of the robot masters we've taken down thus far.